It is 1905. A paper lands on a desk at the journal Annalender Physik. The editor picks it up, scans the title, reads the author's name. Einstein. Just Einstein, not Einstein Marek, not Mileva and Albert. Just Einstein. And right now, somewhere in a small apartment in Bern, Switzerland, you are sitting at a kitchen table. 2 sons asleep in the next room. A husband at work. You do not move for a very long time because you did the mathematics. You checked every single number when he could not make the equations hold. You stayed up through nights he slept through. You gave up your degree, your doctoral thesis, your entire scientific identity to be the quiet, invisible engine behind the loudest name in the history of physics. And your name? Not on the paper. It was never going to be on the paper. This is not a story about a woman who stood beside a great man. This is the story of what it actually costs to change the universe when the universe refuses to remember you did it. This is your life. Every stage of it. Let's go. Level 1. The Girl Who Was Not Supposed to Be Here. December 19th, 1875. Title: Serbia. You were born the eldest daughter of a Serbian military officer, a man with enough money and, more importantly, enough sense to recognize that his daughter is exceptional. Most fathers in 1875 don't act on that. Yours does, loudly. He writes permission letters to school boards. He petitions administrators. He sits across tables from men who tell him, politely, and then firmly, that physics classrooms are simply not for girls. He argues anyway, every single time, and it works. You attend the Royal Serbian Grammar School. You score the highest marks in physics and mathematics in your entire class. Not top of the girls, top of the class, every time. At 16, you transfer to the Royal Classical High School in Zagreb. You are the only woman in the physics program. Teachers shift uncomfortably when you walk in. The boys stare. You outscore all of them. By 20, you have done something no woman in Serbia, possibly in the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire, has done before you. You gain admission to the Zurich Polytechnic, the ETH, one of the most prestigious scientific institutions in Europe. 5 students in your program, you are the only woman. You don't consider this remarkable. You consider it a starting point. And then, in your first year, you sit down next to a lanky, slightly disheveled young man who cannot stop asking questions out loud in the middle of lectures. His name is Albert. Honestly, you find him a bit annoying at first. This is the last correct instinct you will have about him for the next 23 years. Level 2, the partner. You and Albert start studying together. Then it becomes every day. Then it becomes every evening. Then, quite suddenly, you are inseparable. Now, look, he is brilliant. Genuinely, obviously brilliant. You know it. You can feel it in the way he thinks. But his brilliance arrives in these wild, explosive, almost uncontrollable flashes of intuition. Yours is different. Yours is precise, mathematical, methodical. He thinks in pictures. You think in proofs. He needs you, and he knows it. In his letters that still exist, that historians have read, argued over, and published for decades. He calls your shared research our work. He writes about our investigation on relative motion. He says he cannot wait until the two of you together bring it to a victorious conclusion. Our work, our investigation, our conclusion. You read those letters in the evenings after studying, and for the first time in your life, you feel like an equal. Not just smart, not just useful, an equal. This is the last time you will feel that way, because 1900 arrives. The ETH hands out diplomas. Albert passes. He graduates. You fail the final examination by a fraction of a point. Some historians say the examiner marked women differently. Some say the pressure of being the only woman in the room affected your performance. Nobody knows exactly. What everybody does know is this: Albert gets a diploma, you get nothing. You stay in Zurich, work in the lab, plan to retake the exam the following year. You will not make it to that exam. Level 3. The disappearance. In early 1901, while you are preparing to retake the exam that will finally complete your degree, you discover you are pregnant. You are not married. And in 1901, Switzerland, in 1901, Serbia, in 1901, anywhere on Earth, this is not a small problem. This is a life-altering, door-slamming, career-ending social catastrophe. The kind of thing that closes every opportunity that has ever been opened for you. Albert, at this point, is drifting, unemployed, trying to pick up temporary teaching work wherever he can find it. He cannot provide stability. He does not visit you. You travel back to Serbia, alone, to your parents' house in Novi Sad, 3 months pregnant, when you were supposed to be sitting your physics examination. In January 1902, you give birth to a girl. You name her Lieserl. Albert writes to ask about her. His letters are warm, curious even. He asks about her temperament, whether she has good eyes. He calls her by name like she is real to him. He never comes to see her. He never tells his family she exists. Now here's where it gets dark. Liesel gets scarlet fever at 1 year old. She either dies from it or is quietly given up for adoption before anyone outside the family can find out she was ever born at all. The record stops cold. No grave, no adoption papers, no final letter. Nothing. Liesel simply vanishes from every document after September 1903. And Albert Einstein, celebrated, legendary, Nobel Prize-winning Albert Einstein, will spend the rest of his very long, very public life never once acknowledging that his first child existed. Not once. You never speak of it either. That weight, you carry it completely alone. And 4 months after the last mention of Liesel, in January 1903, you marry Albert Einstein in a small civil ceremony in Bern. 2 witnesses, no family present. You give up the last attempt at your degree. You move into a small apartment. You start cooking his meals. Level 4, the annus mirabilis. Albert is working at the patent office in Bern. You have a 1-year-old son, Hans Albert. The apartment is small, the money is thin, and Albert is writing. He writes 4 papers in a single year that will permanently and irreversibly alter humanity's understanding of the physical universe. The photoelectric effect. That one wins the Nobel Prize. Brownian motion. Special relativity. E equals mc squared. 4 papers. 1 year, 1 patent clerk in a rented Swiss apartment. Right. Here is where the official story goes very conveniently quiet. A Russian physicist named Abram Joffe, reviewing papers submitted to the journal, makes a note. He records that the original manuscripts carried the name Einstein Marić, Marić being the Hungarian version of Marek. Joined to a husband's name, as was the custom of the time, some historians dispute what that hyphen actually means. Others do not dispute it at all. What is not disputed? You told a Serbian friend in 1905, right before publication, that we have finished a very important work that will make my husband world famous. We have finished. And in letters from this same period, Albert writes to you about our paper on capillarity. He tells you a professor was impressed with, quote, my investigation, then says he gave the professor our paper. My, our, mine, ours. The language keeps shifting depending on who is reading. By the time those papers reach the journal, there is one name on them. You are in the kitchen of the apartment you both share, and your husband is quietly, then loudly, then deafeningly becoming the most famous scientist who has ever lived. And you say nothing, because what exactly do you say? Level 5. The contract. Albert's career explodes. Professorships, invitations, lectures across Europe. His face in newspapers. His name in every journal that matters. Your marriage deteriorates at exactly the same pace. By 1914, Albert has been offered prestigious positions in Berlin. He tells you the family is moving. You pack everything. You uproot the children. You move to Berlin. Within weeks of arriving, Albert hands you a document. A written document. A list. It specifies the conditions under which he will agree to continue living in the same home as you. Not conditions for a healthier marriage. Not a difficult conversation between 2 adults. A document with numbered conditions. You will not expect affection from him. You will not sit with him unless he invites you. You will not travel alongside him unless appearances require it. You will not speak to him unless spoken to first. You will leave his bedroom and his study immediately when asked. You will not criticize him in front of the children. You read this. You are 38 years old. You gave up your degree. You buried a daughter no one is allowed to mention. You raised his sons. You sat in that Bern apartment working through equations while he took the credit and slept through the nights. And he hands you a list. A fun list of rules for how you are permitted to exist in his presence without inconveniencing him. You last 3 months in Berlin. You take the boys. You return to Zurich. Alone. He does not follow. He is already writing letters. Warm, affectionate letters. To his cousin Elsa. Level 6. The settlement. Albert files for divorce in 1916. You don't want it. Historians note that by this point you are showing every sign of what a modern clinician would call severe clinical depression. The word they use in 1916 is less precise and considerably less kind. The divorce is finalized in 1919, and here is the part that textbooks quietly skip over. As part of the divorce settlement, Albert agrees to transfer every single krona of any future Nobel Prize he might receive directly to you. Now hold on. This is not Albert being generous. This is not guilt. Think about this carefully. Everyone in European scientific circles already knows the Nobel is coming for Einstein. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. Albert knows. His lawyers know. You know. Walker, a historian who has spent years on this case, writes that it is, and I'm quoting carefully here, difficult to resist the conclusion that Mileva saw this money as her reward for the role she played in developing the theory. Albert does not dispute it. He agrees immediately. Quietly. In 1921, the Nobel Committee awards the Nobel Prize in Physics to Albert Einstein. In 1922, every single krona is transferred to you. No public explanation, no acknowledgement, no credit alongside the cash. You take the money, you buy 3 apartment buildings in Zurich. You live in one of them, alone. And the world keeps celebrating the man who signed your shared work with only his name. Level 7. The cost. Your younger son, Edward, is brilliant, genuinely, heartbreakingly brilliant. He plays piano at a level that draws comparisons to concert performers. He reads voraciously. He is funny, sharp, sensitive in ways that remind you of the early Albert, before the list, before Berlin, before all of it. He is also fragile in ways that no amount of brilliance can protect a person from. In 1930, Edward, 20 years old, suffers a complete psychological collapse. He is diagnosed with schizophrenia. He will cycle between your care and psychiatric institutions in Zurich for the rest of his life. You sell one of the apartment buildings to cover his medical bills. Albert, who is now photographed with world leaders, who gives lectures to packed theaters, who has his face on the cover of magazines across 3 continents, sends money occasionally. Not consistently. Not reliably. Occasionally. He visits Edward once. You become Edward's primary caregiver. You manage his medications, his crises, his hospitalizations, his fragile periods of stability, his collapses. You do it the same way you did everything else in your life, without recognition, without help, without a single complaint that anyone ever records. The world is busy building the myth of Einstein, the solitary genius, the untouched mind, the singular, self-made colossus of modern science. You are in Zurich, teaching private mathematics and physics lessons from your apartment to make ends meet. You give exactly 0 interviews about the 1905 papers. Not one. Level 8, the erasure, and what it actually means. August 4th, 1948. You die of a stroke in your apartment in Zurich, 72 years old. Edward is committed to a psychiatric institution. 3 weeks after your death. He will remain there until his own death in 1965. Alone in a room in the city his mother lived and died in. Nobody outside of Serbia and a small circle of physicists knows your name. The letters, the ones where Albert writes, "Our work, our paper, our investigation," are sealed, locked away by his estate. They will not be released to scholars for decades. When they are finally published in 1987, the argument ignites. Was she a co-author? Was she a sounding board? Was she the mathematician who gave precise, publishable form to a brilliant man's raw intuition? Or was she simply an extremely intelligent woman who happened to be married to a genius? Historians argue, physicists weigh in, papers are written about the papers, academics take sides. Here is what is not in dispute. She scored higher than Einstein in applied physics at the Zurich Polytechnic. In the records, she was the only woman in the program. In the records, Einstein used the word hour to describe their work in private correspondence. In the records, she told a friend, her own words, "We finished important work that will make my husband famous." In the records, the Nobel Prize money was transferred to her in its entirety, immediately and without public explanation, by a man who was notoriously careful with his finances. In the records. And her name appears on none of the published papers. Also in the records. You changed the universe, or you helped the person who changed it understand what he was actually changing, or you did the mathematics that made his intuition legible to the rest of science. Historians cannot cleanly agree on which of those 3 things is true. But here is what they can agree on. A woman gave up her degree, her thesis, her firstborn child, 2 decades of her life, and her entire scientific identity to live inside the orbit of a man the world calls the greatest genius who ever lived. And that man, the one who called it our work, who attached your name to the papers in private while removing it in public. Who handed over every krona of his Nobel Prize in a settlement he agreed to immediately and silently? That man spent the rest of his extraordinary, celebrated, endlessly photographed life never once saying your name out loud. The modern world runs on the theory of relativity. GPS satellites, nuclear energy, quantum physics. The technological backbone of every device, every network, every system that powers the 21st century, it traces its mathematics back to those 1905 papers, back to that apartment in Bern, back to that kitchen table, back to you. And here is the question nobody has ever been able to answer cleanly. Not in 1948, not in 1987, not right now in the moment you are watching this. If her name had been on those papers, if the world had been forced to look at the work and see Einstein-Marić, both of them, together, would the myth of the solitary genius have survived? Would we have built the same world on top of it? Or would we have had to confront, 120 years earlier, the deeply uncomfortable truth that the greatest ideas in human history are almost never the product of a single, solitary, untouched mind? You already know the answer. You have always known. You just never got to say it out loud. She changed the universe. Subscribe right now. Otherwise, you'll miss the next genius who's been waiting to get in.